One of the United States' most prolific serial killers is a man you probably have never even heard of. From Bundy to Gacy and Dahmer, we know their names very well. But before everyone got enthralled by those guys, a man named Carl Eugene Watts terrorized women around the country. He's suspected of killing over 100 women, and he almost got away with it. That is until an ordinary citizen from a small Michigan town came forward and put him behind bars for life. Hey everyone, I'm Jen, and this week we've got a fascinating story for you, one which you've probably never heard of.
Hi, I'm Tina. I was in another world.
You were in my intro.
I was definitely in your intro, and I don't know. I'm back.
Okay, take a sip of your coffee. You need to do that.
Seriously?
Yeah. This week, we are sitting here drinking our Roots and Spores coffee. It is delicious. If you haven't ordered Roots and Spores yet, go to their website. I will link it in the show notes. It is delicious.
She's not lying. I mean, she's not blowing smoke. This is really good coffee.
It is.
It's very smooth. Jen made me a cup. I'm drinking it black, but she did top it with a little bit of foam for me.
I'm fancy.
She is. And black coffee for me can be very bitter. I still like it, but it does have a bitter taste usually. This one does not.
It's good. It's super smooth.
It's a very smooth coffee. I'm very impressed. I came in here with a Starbucks iced coffee, a cold brew, and I haven't taken a sip of it since Jen has made me this cup.
Yep. So go check out Roots and Spores for yourself. And before we get into today's episode, if you'd like to help keep us fueled and enjoy a cup of coffee with us, check out our website, buymeacoffee.com, to support our podcast. It helps fuel the show. You get it, Tina? Fuel?
I mean, I definitely need fuel today, obviously. Something is wrong with me.
I was reading the intro and Tina just had this like dazed look.
I don't know. You know, for a minute there, I was thinking, oh, I better calm myself down because I have 2 coffees here. This is going to be crazy.
Double fist.
And all of a sudden, I just, checked out.
That's okay. I'll check you back in. All right. So this week, we are talking about a show called Unknown Serial Killers of America. And we're talking about an episode. It's season 1, episode 1, and about a guy named Carl Watts. Had you ever heard about this guy before?
No.
I hadn't either. And I was like, Unknown Serial Killers of America. That sounds interesting and right up my alley.
I know. I didn't know that there were unknown serial killers.
Tina, you shouldn't say that. We have a true crime podcast.
Whatever. I'm not obsessed with the serial killers. I like to learn about crime and, different types of crime. Killing is not the one.
I feel like the big thing with people being so infatuated with serial killers, I think the thing that they miss is the victims. We've covered a lot of stories where the name of the person is the big grabber, attention grabber, but I feel like you also need to think of the victims. That's a big thing. And today's episode, we're really going to get into these victims.
Right. And as Jen said at the top of this episode, there's more than 100 of them.
Victims.
I can't fathom. That's crazy.
So, needless to say, this episode is not for everyone. Little ones, turn this off. Go listen to Doggyland or go watch Bluey because we love Bluey in this household. But yeah, so listener. Why do I say viewer? Listener.
Because you want us to be viewed.
I do.
Jen has been pushing us to do video podcasts. So she's doing, I'm thinking, I know what you're doing, Jen. these subtle little hints. She's ready.
I did an episode, the Coburger episode. I posted on YouTube with video, and I loved it.
I'm very comfortable right here where I am. She's eventually going to talk me into it. I already know her.
You know me well. Okay, let's jump into today's episode. This week's episode kicks off in Ferndale. I love that name, Ferndale.
Right, and I've never heard of it.
Same. Ferndale, Michigan in 1979. And Ferndale is a suburb of Detroit, which is the Motor City. Now, Joseph Foy is an ordinary citizen going about his life in Ferndale. But that quickly changes on the night of December 14th, 1979. He looks out of his window to see a black man with a light beard and a knife in his hand stabbing a woman in an alleyway next to his house. We're jumping right into this.
Sure are. Wow.
I gave a viewer a warning.
Okay.
36-year-old Helen Dutcher is stabbed multiple times. And before the killer runs away, something catches his attention. Joseph Foy in the window. The two lock eyes. It's only for a few seconds, but those seconds will change history.
Joseph says those eyes were cold, lifeless, pure evil, and that is chilling. The thought of locking eyes with that man, and I've only encountered eyes like that one time in my life. I understand what he's saying.
What eyes have you encountered?
Okay, so we lived in a condo about a decade ago in downtown Jacksonville, Florida.
Uh-huh.
And downtown during the day in Jacksonville is busy. But once people leave for work, it gets pretty quiet.
Okay.
I was letting my dog out for the night, so I walked him to a little park area across the building. And there was this man with a hoodie walking along the sidewalk. It was dark outside. And he was walking with his head down, so I couldn't see his face. And the people that live around the area are always really friendly. So I say hi to the man as he passed by. And I remember seeing him immediately turn his head toward me. And he looks at me with what I can only describe as evil eyes. Cold, evil eyes. He's angry. And he says, "Don't you ever talk to me."
That's creepy.
He looks me straight in the eyes. "Don't you ever talk to me." He turns around and he keeps walking. I was stunned.
Was he like homeless?
I don't know.
Wow.
I didn't think so. He, just looked like a guy to
That's
me
scary.
walking down the street. I was terrified and I couldn't do it. I just stood there I stood there for probably way too long. I mean, if this guy was really dangerous, I shouldn't have just been sitting there or standing there. I should have just...
You were like frozen in fear.
I was. I can't imagine what Joseph is feeling in this moment, except his is worse because he actually witnessed this guy murder someone. And Joseph says his dog was barking, and that's the reason why he looked out the window in the first place. And he's also taking mental notes while he's seeing this. This is probably a matter of seconds, and he's taking mental notes of what this guy looks like, which is so smart. And one of the things he notices is that this man has a smaller frame. He's already can describe his face, and he can already describe his build.
So he's got a mental picture in his mind. He's gonna remember him.
And as we will discover later in the episode, that picture never goes away. And same for me, this happened over a decade ago. Mine was not nearly as traumatic at that. And I can recall this guy's face and eyes still to this day.
It's like you and the vampire in New Orleans.
Oh my gosh, are we going to bring that guy up again?
Made you trip on the 2x4.
Yeah, I'm never going to be able to get rid of that one.
We talked about that in a previous episode. Loved it. Mm-hmm. Okay, back to Joseph. Police get to the scene and find Helen Dutcher, but they find no evidence at the scene. She had not been sexually assaulted. There was no weapon left behind. There was nothing except for Joseph, who ended up giving police a sketch of the suspect. And what happens? The case goes cold. That is until 4 months later in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's 40 miles away from Ferndale. And Ann Arbor is the home of the University of Michigan. And it's also a super, super safe community. It's 4 a.m. It's dark outside. and Shirley Small is walking home. She was stabbed one time in the heart, and she had small stab wounds and slashes on her face, and this happened right outside of her house. There was no evidence of rape. There were no witnesses, no weapon, nothing at all. And the case, again, went cold. And that takes us to 3 months later, again in Ann Arbor, when Glinda Richmond was coming home around 4:30 in the morning, and she was stabbed over 20 times in the left breast with a screwdriver. And she died a few feet from her front porch. There was no evidence, nothing was left behind, and no leads. Now, police got the information out to the public as quickly as they could, and tips started coming in, which they followed, but they never got anywhere with those tips. And 2 months after Glinda Richmond was killed, another murder in Ann Arbor took place. 30-year-old Rebecca Greer, who was a graduate student, was walking home right before dawn, and she was stabbed 54 times also in the left breast, right outside of her house. And marks on her body looked like she had been stabbed with a small screwdriver. And all three of these homicides in Ann Arbor were single women. They were walking alone. There was no attempt whatsoever to hide the body, and there was no evidence left behind.
All three murders happen around the same time of day, when it's dark outside, between 4 and 5 a.m. There were also no signs of robbery, no reason for these murders that they could see. Paul Bunton, a retired captain of the Ann Arbor PD, says these homicides were like none other that they had had in Ann Arbor. He says these were killing just to kill.
That's terrifying. Mm-hmm. The killer could be anyone. Dr. Harley Stock, who's a forensic psychologist, helped develop the profile of the suspect. He says that the type of weapon used in this crime, the small screwdriver-looking weapon, meant that it was an intimate crime. The suspect wanted to be close to his victims. It's not like he just shot them from a ways away. He was up close and personal with them. And he was getting satisfaction out of making these women suffer. We also figure out that all of these crimes happened on Sunday mornings. And so this guy started becoming known as the Sunday morning slasher. And police started looking at other parts of the state, other parts of Michigan, to see if there were any other similar crimes out there. They found another one in Kalamazoo, where Western Michigan University is. There was a woman who had been killed in her doorway of her home with multiple stab wounds, and police had a suspect, and the suspect's name was Carl Eugene Watts, who also apparently was known as Coral Watts, like coral, you know, the sea stuff, like, you know what I'm talking about. But apparently the suspect was never charged with this woman's death.
So they have this guy, but there's a problem. No one knows where he is. Also, can you imagine the work they're putting into this investigation?
Hours, I bet, every single day. So much work.
There's no internet database at this time where they can search for similar crimes in the state. They're having to reach out to each police station individually and figure out if there's been similar cases elsewhere. But not only are they searching the rest of the state, they're also looking for this killer in Ann Arbor. He seems to attack on the same day of the week, around the same time of the day, so they start patrolling the campus areas on those days, on those times.
That takes us to November 15th, 1980. We're in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's 4:40 in the morning. This happens 1 month after Rebecca Greer's death. It's Sunday morning on campus. The campus is quiet, and police are on the hunt for the man who's been attacking lone women in the early morning hours. Police are out surveilling, and they stop at a red light. And they see a woman walking down the street by herself. And that's when police see a man staring right at her from inside his car, which is stopped at the red light also. Police watch the man drive around the block and start following the woman. Thankfully, the police managed to get the license plate number, and the car was registered to Coral Watts. Police are familiar with his name because he was named the person of the interest in the other cases.
Police now call for backup. They need to get this guy before he hurts someone else. And I wonder if this woman is aware that it's a dangerous hour for her to be out and about, because she moves quickly and she suddenly disappears from view and Coral can't find her.
The woman managed to get into her apartment building, but unbeknownst to her, she was in the crosshairs of the vicious killer. He wanted her, and for him, the hunt was on. Police continued following Coral Watts and watched him hit the gas as he was trying to figure out what building she had gone into. And they managed to stop him because he ran a red light. And he was taken into custody. And at this point, you got to think, like, it's over, case solved, we're all good. Ann Arbor Police Captain Paul Benton interviewed Coral Watts, who immediately asked for a lawyer. He then told the captain that he wanted his car back, to which Captain Benton said, "No way, we have a search warrant for it."
The police captain says Coral Watts was relaxed and civil while they were talking, but he mentions that he had hollow eyes.
There's the eyes thing again.
Yep.
Inside Coral Watts' brown Pontiac Grand Prix, they found a dictionary with the words "Rebecca is a lover" on it, which that's strange. But remember, there was a victim named Rebecca Greer Huff. Could this be her dictionary?
Also strange, they sent the dictionary off for testing at the crime lab, but didn't find Rebecca's or Coral's fingerprints on the book. That's weird. This book is in his car and not even his fingerprints are on it?
In the trunk of the car, police found 2 screwdrivers. Now remember, it was suspected that the killer was using screwdrivers to kill these women in Ann Arbor. And we're told there was no blood and no evidence on them being used in a crime. And frustration is mounting at this point.
So Police Captain Bunton is sure this is the guy, but he needs proof.
So Captain Bunton starts digging into Coral Watts' history. He was born on November 7th, 1953 in Texas. When he was little, his mom moved Coral and his siblings to Detroit. And around 8 or 9, he came down with meningitis.
Coral Watts gets not just meningitis, a severe case of meningitis is what they say.
I still don't know what that is.
So meningitis is an inflammation of the membranes that cover the brain and the spinal cord. And according to the Meningitis Research Foundation, it can affect people differently. And there could be lasting effects with severe meningitis. And those lasting effects could include mental health issues and changes to personality or behavior. We learned that Coral Watts reportedly changed after recovering from meningitis. This is what his family reports to authorities, that his personality was different. They say he started talking about women, evil spirits, and evil eyes. And that's all we get. No detail or context.
When he was 14 or 15, he reportedly attacked a woman on a newspaper route, and we hear that he was arrested for choking the woman.
And he tells prosecutors that he felt like beating someone up. That's why he did it.
When he was 20, he attacked 2 women and was sentenced to 1 year in jail, and then was released. So that takes us to 1980, when Watts was being interviewed by Captain Bunton. Since there was no DNA and no real evidence against Watts, the police had no choice but to let him go. Obviously, police are worried that he's their killer, so they end up putting a tracker on Watts' car. And that's when the police start following him around town. Wherever Watts went, so did the police.
Jen, I find this fascinating. They had trackers in 1980? Don't you think that's cool?
I mean, I guess.
I didn't know that was a thing way back then. I think it's awesome. Also, Police Chief Bunton says he wanted Coral Watts to know he was being watched, and he made sure Coral Watts saw him. They see him going to and from work at a trucking company, but also find something interesting. Sometimes Coral Watts drives around at night, up to 300 miles a night. That's like 5 hours of highway driving.
That's a long, long way he's going.
Don't you think so? And I am reminded of an encounter I had when I was interning at a TV station in college. I had just gotten in for the day, and I was chatting with a producer, and I asked him how his day was, just making friendly conversation. And he said he was tired because he couldn't sleep the night before. So he got in his car in the middle of the night and drove 2.5 hours away to the nearest big city, turned around, and drove back. That's 5 hours, Jen.
Just because he was bored?
Because he couldn't sleep.
I was just about to say, was he a serial killer too?
Also, Jen, I remember that he was offended when I told him that that was kind of a weird thing to do.
That's a far way to drive.
When I can't sleep at night, I read a book. I turn on a movie. There's no way I'm driving around in the middle of the night.
I don't like to drive at night because I feel like my vision isn't all that great. And
right.
So, plus you're tired.
And there's other people out there who have probably been drinking.
Yeah, I don't like
dangerous.
That. I just don't like driving at night, period.
Right. I really wish I could remember this guy's name so I could find out if he was ever arrested for anything. I think it's a red flag to be driving around 5 hours in the middle of the night.
I mean, what are you doing?
I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, back to the show. Coral Watts knows he's being watched. So as someone in the show puts it, he takes a break from his horrible hobby of killing women.
That is a horrible hobby.
Yep.
One day, the tracker, remember they have a tracker on Watts's car?
Yeah, that's what I thought was awesome.
The tracker died, and Watts is gone.
The batteries in the tracker died. Shouldn't someone be in charge of regularly changing the batteries out? Police Chief Benton goes to Coral's workplace and asks, "Where is Coral?" The boss at the site tells him Coral doesn't work there anymore, but he does leave the business an address to mail his last check.
And where did he turn up? In Houston, Texas. And this takes us to late December 1980, when Houston police receive a package in the mail from the Ann Arbor police captain with a lot of information about Coral Watts.
Captain Bunton gives Houston PD the heads up also. He calls them and tells them they need to watch him to keep him under surveillance. So Houston PD detectives look him up. They find out where he lives and where he works.
There's a big problem for police, though. In the 1980s, Houston was the murder capital of the United States, which meant that Watts could slip under the radar and blend in amongst the other killers in the city. In 1980 alone, listen to this factoid, Tina. You know how I love some factoids, right? Mm-hmm. In 1981 alone, there were over 700 homicides in the city of Houston, which meant that Houston was the perfect hunting ground for Watts.
Okay, hold on. I'm doing math. So 700 divided by 365. That's about 2 murders a day.
Yeah. When you and I went to New Orleans for New Year's that one year, New Orleans at the time was the United States murder capital. Did you know that?
No, Jen. I obviously did not know that, or I would have refused to go.
Tina's sitting here looking like she's about to whack me in the back of the head. See, this is why we need video podcasting.
Do you remember when we pulled up to the hotel in New Orleans and there was a sketchy guy outside and he was just trying to come up to the car? Do you remember this?
Vaguely.
Vaguely?
I mean, I don't remember much from that trip.
Terrified.
You're like, what has Jen gotten me into?
Yes. I cannot believe it was the murder capital at that time. I
feel like you're never going to go on a trip with me again.
Right?
Well, we have to go to Kentucky to try Pappy.
Well, I'm going to be researching murder rates in Kentucky.
I feel like it's probably pretty low.
Anyway, not only is Houston the murder capital around this time, we find out in the show that Houston PD is understaffed to handle this amount of homicides. I mean, of course.
I mean, I feel like, one, if the police department is understaffed, like, the crime rate is going to go up.
I'm trying to think of... but I'm trying to think of the opposite.
You kind of look like a prairie dog just then. You have this, you know when they, like, poke their head out of the hole, it's like, You know what I mean?
Listen, I think this coffee is affecting me in an interesting way. Most people get sharper when they drink coffee. They can process their thoughts. They can focus. I feel...
You look more chill.
I feel like I'm more chill and my brain is processing slower. I have thoughts and I can't properly express them to you. Anyway, yeah, okay, so you're saying that if they're understaffed, the crime will go up. Okay, I get that.
You get it now?
Yep.
Okay. I'm doing the why we need video podcasting.
I don't want anyone to see me looking like a prairie dog. They are cute, though.
I love a good prairie dog. Prairie dog.
A prairie dog?
Okay. Back to the murders.
Oh, boy. We've got a long way to go.
Bear with me here,
Okay.
my friend. Drink your coffee. All right. So this takes us to February 6, 1982. 20-year-old Elena Samander goes out for the evening with her friends. The next morning, Sunday, the family knows something is wrong when everyone wakes up and Elena is not home. That's when the Samander family got a phone call. And the call is truly every parent's worst nightmare. Elena's body was found in a trash truck. She had been murdered and then dumped. And at the time, police didn't have any idea what happened to 20-year-old Elena.
We do find out that she was strangled, and her siblings talk about the day they found out she was killed. The whole family is in shock. Elena was the oldest of 4 siblings. She was artistic, they say, and athletic. And these siblings seem to really love each other. I loved this about them. They have fond memories of laughing with Elena and remembering her as the protective older sister. And no one knows why anyone would want to kill her. Elena's siblings tell us the police weren't giving her parents a ton of information about Elena's murder. They say that's when their mom became an amateur detective to try to find out who killed Elena. She was keeping track of all the other murders in the city. She was collecting newspaper clippings and even creating her own timeline.
And 3 months later, on Sunday, May 23rd, 1982, Melinda Aguilar woke up and noticed that her roommate, Lori Lister, was not home. But then within a few minutes, Melinda heard some keys jingling at the front door, and the front door opened up. But it's not Lori opening that door. Melinda comes face to face with a black man wearing a hoodie. It's always somebody in a hoodie. Police tell us that the man saw Lori Lister driving up to her apartment and pounced on her. He choked her and then dragged her up the stairs to her apartment, which she shared with Melinda. The man got into the apartment and immediately started strangling Melinda. And Melinda, she is a smart lady. You know what she does? She plays dead.
She goes limp, and it works. And I just want to say real quick, it is May in Houston, and this person is in a hoodie. Red flag. It's hot.
It's hot in Houston.
It's hot in Houston in May. I mean, if you see anyone walking around anywhere in, a hot area wearing a hoodie, red flag.
So the suspect then drags Melinda, who is playing possum, to the bedroom and lays her on her own bed. He then walks to her closet and grabs some wire hangers and ends up using them to tie her hands together. And what happens next is shocking.
Melinda hears this man clap and jump up in excitement.
That's a red flag.
Disgusting.
He then dragged Lori to the bathtub and fills the tub with water. Melinda, remember, she was playing possum. She's actually alive and she's still hanging on. She sprung into action with both hands tied together with those wire hangers. She went to their second-story balcony and jumped off the balcony and ran for help.
I have to repeat this. She jumps off the balcony with her hands tied behind her back. She's on the second story and she doesn't break any bones. I would have had at least 4 broken bones. And she runs.
She's a trooper. Neighbors call Houston police and the suspect flees the apartment. Another neighbor ran up to the apartment and found Lori Lister in the tub and ended up lifting Lori out of the water and saved her life. With all this commotion going on, there's police everywhere. And the suspect is caught in the parking lot. Who is it? You guessed it, Coral Watts. Watts is arrested and taken to the police station. And it turns out, though, that Watts had been busy that Sunday morning. Police discovered that earlier that same day, in another apartment complex nearby, Michelle Mayday had been drowned in her bathtub. The exact same MO as what Coral Watts was trying to do to Lori Lister. Now, police are trying to figure out why in the world would Coral Watts, go from stabbing women in Michigan to strangling and drowning them in Texas. And this is where forensic psychologist Dr. Stock says that it's unusual for serial killers to change their style. But for Coral Watts, there was the commonality in the killings. And that commonality is how he chose his victims.
Right. Dr. Stock says he was looking for easy victims, people he could easily get to.
At this point, everyone is relieved that Coral Watts is in jail. And you know who was especially relieved? Captain Bunton from the Ann Arbor Police Department. He ended up flying down to Houston to talk to Coral Watts. And at this point, Houston police knew that Watts had tried to kill 3 women in the span of a few hours that Sunday morning in May of 1982. But he had been living in Houston for more than a year. So the question was, how many more victims are out there? Because you know there were more victims out there.
Mm-hmm. We find out that after Coral Watts moved to Houston, there were more missing women or women that had been killed than there were before he was living there.
Coral Watts was charged with attempted capital murder and burglary with the intent to commit murder for the case of Lori Lister. But police say they didn't have any evidence to tie Watts to any of the murders.
And we hear on the show that Houston police know, they absolutely know, Coral Watts is a serial killer. The problem is they can't connect him to any of the missing women because there are no bodies. Therefore, no proof of any murder. They need to find out where these missing women are.
At this point, Coral Watts was sentenced to 60 years in prison for the attempted murder of Lori Lister. But because police suspect he's killed many more, they strike up an offer, and Watts agrees to tell them about his other victims. The deal, however, would mean that Watts would confess to all the killings he was responsible for in the state of Texas. And the state of Texas would not seek additional charges against him. So it wouldn't matter how many people he killed in the state of Texas. He would only go to prison for that one sentence of 60 years for the attempted murder of Lori Lister.
I don't know how I feel about this deal. Coral Watts was around 28 at this time, which means he'd be 88 after serving 60 years. Maybe you're too feeble at 88 to hurt anyone, but what if he's not? It's irritating to me that he gets the satisfaction of talking about what he did without having any consequences, because I'm sure it's thrilling for him to relive all of this. At the same time, I also see how he does hold valuable information that is crucial for families to get closure, to bury their loved ones. It's a dilemma. Let's get to the confessions. To recap the timeline, Coral Watts was arrested in May of 1982. The confessions began in August.
That's right. So Watts starts talking to the police about his reign of terror, and it's truly a reign of terror. We get to see the actual interrogation video from this on the show. Watts was linked to the murder of 34-year-old medical student Suzanne Searles, who was killed in April of 1982 outside of her Galveston apartment. In the interrogation video, the detective asks Watts what he did when she got out of her car, to which he responds, "I grabbed her by the neck." Watts ended up strangling her and then drowned her. He also confessed to hanging a woman with her tube top, and the confessions just kept coming and kept coming. He ended up confessing to 13 murders in Houston. Watts told police he buried some of the bodies, others he threw into dumpsters, one was thrown into a swamp. And when asked why he would do this, Watts said he had to trap their evil spirit. What a psycho.
Jen, he's clearly projecting.
One of the murders Watts ended up confessing to was the murder of Elena Samander. But the family was absolutely furious when they found out that Watts had been given a plea deal. And so was Joseph Foy. Remember, we had talked about Joseph Foy back in Michigan. He was the one who saw 36-year-old Helen Dutcher being stabbed in an alley right outside of his home in 1979 up in Ferndale, Michigan. So Joseph was watching TV one evening and was watching the world news when he came face to face again with the man from that night outside of his house.
Joseph sees footage of Coral Watts in a Texas courtroom on the news and says, that's him. That's the guy he saw killing a woman 3 years before.
He found out that Watts was sentenced to 60 years, but that wasn't enough for him. So he persistently called the Ferndale Police Department.
Joseph tells the police department the story about how he saw this guy who committed the murder and that it's Coral Watts, the same guy he saw on TV in Texas. Police tell him they may need to fly him to Texas to point him out in a lineup, and he's up for it. He's ready to go. But this doesn't happen. Joseph says he was told that authorities believed Coral Watts would die in prison, and they decided not to pursue any charges in Michigan.
That ticks me off.
That ticks me off, too.
I'm doing that for our clean rating. I would say much meaner words.
I appreciate that.
Tina's very proud of our clean rating.
I sure am.
So Joseph said he was bugging the police for about a month until he was told to put it to rest, but he couldn't. And turns out neither could Captain Bunton from the Ann Arbor Police Department and forensic psychologist Dr. Stock. Watts didn't admit to killing anyone in Michigan directly. But Dr. Stock said Coral Watts had a message to police in Michigan. He told them, there aren't enough fingers and toes in this room for the number of women I've killed. And that is terrifying. Even if there's only 2 people in that room.
That's too much.
That's too many. You have 10 toes, you have 10 fingers. That is 40 people if you only have 2 people.
That's disgusting.
And this takes us to 1992, when a victim's advocate named Andy Kahn in Houston met with Elena Samander's mom. Elena Samander's mom, remember, she had been like the citizen sleuth. She had asked to check on Watts because after spending only 10 years in prison for the attempted murder of Lori Lister, Watts was coming up on parole.
I credit Elena's mom, really, for starting this whole thing and trying to find justice for her daughter.
I think once somebody is in prison, you kind of forget about them.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't for Elena Samander's mom keeping up with this and knowing when he would come up for parole, who knows what would have happened.
I know. The thought of it is terrifying, truly. I didn't bring up the possibility of parole earlier because I thought there's no way that this guy is going to get parole. I can't believe they sentenced this guy to 60 years with possible parole?
So victims advocate Kahn ended up calling the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and was told that because of the issue with Coral Watts' plea deal, in which he ended up to confessing to, remember, several murders in Houston, Watts would be automatically released in 2006. Holy moly. Because of a technicality, this known murderer who has also confessed to dozens of homicides was going to be released into the world. That is terrifying.
And what issue are they even talking about? This is absolutely ridiculous. At this point, I'm watching the show and I have anxiety. Someone needs to fix this.
Turns out in 1982, as part of that 60-year sentence, the plea deal involved using a deadly weapon. The deadly weapon in Lori Lister's case was water to drown her. The problem was that 5 years after being sentenced, the Texas Criminal Court of Appeals issued a ruling that said Watts had to be notified to this plea bargain that use of a deadly weapon affects his parole eligibility. And the trial court in Houston had not done that. This reminds me of the case of Molly Tibbetts when the police officer didn't Mirandize her murderer before she took his statement. And it just makes me want to rip my hair out.
First of all those things, all those words, I just I can't listen because it's nonsense. First of all, who is the person who said, hey, no one told old Coral Watts about this part of the plea deal, therefore it's trash. I don't even think, Jen, that NASA looks this closely at their pre-flight plan before they decide to launch a freaking rocket into space. And by the way, I have no idea if if NASA even has pre-flight plans or if this analogy makes any sense. I'm so upset and flustered And these are words I'm just writing down that are just coming in my brain right now.
Mm-hmm. It's infuriating. It is. So because of a technicality, it was going to get tossed. So because that happened with Watts, the Court of Criminal Appeals removed the deadly weapon ruling, which meant that Watts was named a non-violent offender.
Do you see me itching?
I do see you itching. I see you itching and I see you twitching.
I'm so upset.
So he was reclassified as a non-violent offender despite admitting to murdering many women. But authorities couldn't use that against him because of the plea deal.
Not only am I angry, rightfully so, the family of Elena is also angry. They are doing everything they can to cause a ruckus and get someone to fix this mess. They know this guy is dangerous if he's released from prison. So they're all over the media, doing interviews, trying to get somebody's attention to keep this guy behind bars where he belongs.
He really does. And that takes us to 2002, the 20th anniversary of the Houston murders. It's also 4 years until Watts is set to be released from prison. The clock is ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Time is running out for the victims' families to find something, any tiny shred of evidence to keep Watts in prison. Now, Tina, walk us through what the family members did at this point. It gives me chills just thinking about it.
Elena Samander's family organizes a call to action memorial, and they invited all of the victims' families. And it does give me chills to think about this and to watch it on this show. It's very powerful. One family member of each victim goes up to the podium to talk about their loved one, and we see footage of this, of a room filled with people. Even police officers are there supporting. There's tables with pictures of the women, a podium with at least half a dozen microphones, so you know media was there capturing this moment. And do you remember Lori Lister, the survivor?
Yep.
She's also there, and she speaks up about how she was supposed to be one of those girls. The attendees are called to action, to let them know if they have any information to keep Coral Watts behind bars. They are asking people to speak up.
At the memorial, we hear from the victim advocate, Andy Kahn, speak, and what he says is absolutely terrifying. He says, Carl Eugene Watts, also known as Coral Watts, will be the first serial killer in this country ever to be legally released, and I'm asking everyone here, are we going to let that happen? To which we hear a loud no being yelled by the audience, followed by a round of applause. Turns out this memorial service received national attention, and someone in Detroit, Michigan was watching. Donna Pendergast, who was working in the Wayne County, Michigan's prosecutor's office, got a call from a reporter in Texas asking what Michigan was going to do about the upcoming release of Coral Watts in Texas. Needless to say, a serial killer being released from prison definitely got her attention.
Not only that, Jen, but this affects Donna personally. She says her blood went cold when she started looking into Coral Watts. She says this guy was the boogeyman during her senior year at the University of Michigan. That was during the time Coral was attacking women in the early morning hours in Michigan. And this is the first time that Donna learns that police had narrowed down their serial killer search to Coral Watts back then, but nothing came of it when he moved to Texas.
At this point, Donna Pendergast and Andy Kahn start looking through old cases, 200 cases to be exact. They knew Watts had a pattern, a lone female, killed at night or in the early morning.
And they're trying to find at least one case, they just need one, that they can tie to Coral Watts. Can they find something that police overlooked back then?
That takes us to 2004. Tick, tick, tick. That clock continues to tick away, and Coral Watts is only 2 years away from being released. A serial killer is only 2 years away from being released from prison. Re-enter Joseph Foy of Ferndale, Michigan. It's January 2004. He's flipping through the TV channels and sees on the screen none other than Coral Watts and the Attorney General of Michigan pleading on the screen for anyone at all that has any kind of information about any murders and Watts to please call. So what does Joseph Foy do? He calls and he starts talking to investigators about the murder of Helen Dutcher behind his house in 1979.
Jen, thank goodness for Joseph Foy and his TV. And thank goodness, after all these years, Joseph doesn't give up.
Tina, walk me through it because it's been more than 2 decades since the murder, and what the Attorney General of Michigan did was genius, in my opinion.
I agree. Joseph tells the Attorney General that he witnessed a murder in 1979, and the killer was Coral Watts. Joseph says he now has a glimmer of hope talking to her because she sounds interested in his story. Finally, someone is listening to him. Donna, the Attorney General, says when she was talking to Joseph, she had a feeling that this was the case she was looking for. This is what she needed. And remember, as far as we know, Joseph is the only eyewitness to any of these murders. The challenge now is convincing a jury that Joseph witnessed this murder 25 years ago in a dark alley and that he's sure he saw Coral Watts. And here's the genius. Donna says she petitioned the court to bring in all of the murders in Texas that Coral got immunity for. This information can show a pattern of Coral isolating women all around the same time in the late night, early morning hours and attacking them. And the judge agrees to this.
Woohoo! And this takes us to November 2004 when the Michigan trial of Coral Watts began for the 1979 murder of Helen Dutcher. Joseph Foy had the eyes of all the families, both the Michigan families and the Texas families, on him that day when he took the witness stand.
All of those Texas families never received justice for their loved ones. This was their last chance to at least hope that this guy would never be released from prison. Joseph says he felt anxious walking into court. He knew all of those families were depending on him and on his testimony, and he doesn't want to let them down.
I really like Joseph.
Me too.
Joseph says he sat down and he looked right at Coral Watts, and Coral Watts looked right at him, and it was a showdown, a face-to-face in that courtroom, and it was just like that night in the alley in 1979. Joseph came across as cool, calm, and collected, but the question was, what would the jury decide?
Joseph says the defense attorney asked him how he would remember seeing Coral when it was just a glance. Joseph replied, "Have you ever had a glance with a beautiful woman in a bar? It could last forever."
I love that.
And Joseph says that shut him up.
I love it. I love it. The jury deliberated for only a few hours and ended up finding Coral Watts guilty of first-degree premeditated murder in the killing of Helen Dutcher, which meant he would be in prison for the rest of his life. Joseph Foy says that he felt like the weight of the world had come off his shoulders. No one will ever know truly how many women fell victim to Coral Watts, but we hear that it's estimated he killed over 100 women in the United States and Canada.
Dr. Harley Stock, the forensic psychologist, says this makes Coral Watts the most prolific serial killer in the United States. But what's crazy is he's one you've never heard of. We hear on the show that this is because while most serial killers have egos, they like attention, Coral Watts was just a cold-blooded killer. And I appreciate how they ended the show. We see Elena Samander's family reminiscing about her. We hear Joseph Foy say that every December 1st, he goes back to where Helen Dutcher was killed, and he says a prayer for her. And he says no matter the nightmares that he had and still has about what he witnessed, it comes down to doing the right thing. And he says he would do it again in a heartbeat.
I really like Joseph. I think he is just a great individual who never gave up. The fact that he was calling police, trying to get them involved, like, come on, look into this, and just never gave up after so many years is incredible.
Gives me hope for humanity.
Right? Mm-hmm. According to the Los Angeles Times, Coral Watts died in 2007 of prostate cancer at 53 years old. Bye-bye, Coral Watts.
Not sad about it.
Not at all. Ugh, what an episode. I had never heard about him, but the fact that investigators across the country believe that he killed over 100 women is petrifying.
Right, and the ones that we only heard about it's just a fraction.
Yeah.
The ones that we know about on the show, that means there's so many other families out there who never got closure.
Mm-hmm. Well, and back then, like you had mentioned, in the 70s and early 80s, there wasn't that one system where you could input everything and, link these crimes. So who knows what other states? Did he go on vacations? Did he,
What other countries? If it was United States and Canada.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's scary. Oh, well, I finished my coffee. Did you finish your coffee?
I'm just about done.
I like it. If you enjoyed this episode, you can fuel our podcast by visiting our website, buymeacoffee.com/2crimenewsies, and make a donation. You can make a tiny donation. You can make a donation of any amount, and we would really appreciate it. It takes a lot of fuel to keep these podcasts going, but we love it.
It sure does. You can also go to twocrimenewsies.com. We have a link to buy me a coffee right there.
Yep. And before we end the episode, I want to read a review that a listener named Big Jags left us on Apple Podcast. Big Jags says, "This is a fun podcast if you want to learn about old cases. They investigate or talk about the case's possible outcomes and suspects. It's a fun podcast to listen to because they have a good time doing it and they do a great job of getting you involved in the story. Very much worth a listen. I will continue to listen to many more episodes. Great work." Thank you so much. That was a great review.
What a nice thing to say. Thank you.
It makes me happy that we bring a little bit of joy to people.
I think what it is I really enjoy hanging out with you, and I hope you enjoy hanging out with me.
I love it.
I think that comes across in this podcast.
I think so too. I think you're right. All right, my friend. Well, we will be back next week with another episode of Two Crime Newsies. We hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and we will talk to you guys later.